Today's video is another custom project from our friend SciFi guy Gordon Payton. In this video, he will show you how to install the Pontiac Solstice mirrors on the Opel GT. These mirrors come in motorized and non-motorized form, and there will be links in the bottom so you can find out where to get them, along with the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified of more of these kind of videos. And with that, let's get to it.
All right, this is my video on how to install Pontiac Solstice side view mirrors that have 3 bolts. They have a slightly different shape to the foot than the shape of an Opel GT door where you have to bolt them. 3 bolts are anchored in a metal chassis and they look like this. To get them out, which is what you're going to have to do first, is you can grab the ring that's at the base when it's screwed all the way in and grab that and try to unscrew it, or at the top there's a Torx or a Torx end on it, and you can grab that with a pair of pliers and you can unscrew the stud from the chassis. This is the other doors one. This is the one that goes on this door, and I've already removed the screws. Okay, so step 1 is to set the distance up and down on the door. And I have found that the best location is 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 to 1 inch below the sill of your window. That would be this edge right here. So that edge, approximately 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch below the door, is the optimal location. It also happens to be approximately where you see that seam lining up with the top of the door. Okay, so that's the height. The next thing to do is to take a level and make the opening of the mirror perpendicular to the ground at 3/4 of an inch down from the windowsill at that point. So it'd be right about there. Then come around this side, or this point sticking forward, put a mark right there and mark on the door that location. You then take a level and you draw a line that's parallel to the ground. Zoop. The optimal distance from the edge of the door along that line is 3 inches. You can go 2 3/4, possibly 2 1/2. And that is the perfect location for these mirrors. Okay, so you now have the door covered with painter's tape. You've got a mark here setting its right to left distance, and you got a mark here showing its up-down distance. Now you want to somehow mark the 3 bolt holes. So bear with me while I screw the studs into the mirror. They don't have to go in all the way, they just have to be the same height in relation to each other. Okay, so now you got the 3 studs sticking out of the mirror. Position your mirror vertical or perpendicular to the ground at 3 inches from the front of the door, and with this edge 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch down below the sill, the windowsill, or approximately where the seam of the leg of the mirror is. It should now be sitting on all 3 bolts. And what I discovered is that if you just press kind of hard, and it'll make marks in the painter's tape. Those are your drill holes. You can mark them, ding, ding, ding. You can double check, always double check, and triple check. Quadruple check too, while you're at it, to make sure that you're at the right spot, that this opening is perpendicular to the ground, that you're 3 inches from the front of the door along that line, and that you are 3/4 of an inch to an inch below the top. And mark your holes. Center punch, drill with a 1/16 inch, 1/16 drill bit, then enlarge to a 1/4 inch, and see if you can get your mirror on. Now, of course, when you do it, and when I did it earlier, of course none of the holes didn't match up.
He's on his 5th door now.
Yeah. So I had to hog out one of them to get all 3 bolts to go in. There's plenty of room for error. You could be you could be radically off in a lot, and you'll still be able to tilt the mirror to whatever angle you need to view. Okay. The mirror can now fit into the door and be bolted on, but there is the problem that this curve does not match the door. And you're going to fix that problem with a thick foam gasket. You put the mirror against the door, and it's correct in all of its various parameters, you'll see that there's a gap in the back and in the front. The top and bottom will be touching. So, these mirrors come with a rubber gasket that fits on there. That's fine for the door it was made for. It's absolutely useless on this mirror, on these doors. So I found some industrial floor mat. These are like padded mats for people to stand on while they're working in a factory. And has rubber with a diamond plate pattern on one side, and it has this nice, dense, last forever kind of foam on the bottom. I took a razor knife and sliced it off, cut the foam to be a 1/4 inch larger than the outside perimeter of the foot of the mirror. You want it to stick out some. You don't want it perfectly flush, otherwise it will just get pushed in to the mirror foot. So you're gonna put your bolts back in, you're gonna put your gasket on, and you're gonna slide your bolts in and then start the bolting process. Okie dokie, well that was quick. Actually not. Took me almost a half an hour to get the mirror bolted on. I have trimmed and sanded the outside of my gasket so it's an even amount sticking out. You can go back later and with a razor blade, trim some of it back if you want. But take a look, front and rear. The gasket's noticeable. It's the drawback of the mod is that you have to use a thick gasket to make it work. You're going to have to, unless you happen to have an old speaker hole that previous owner had cut in the door, you're going to have to grab a nut, get your arm up in there, and kind of hold it on backwards and try to spin it onto the bolts with your finger. Now, there's 3 bolts. two at the top, one at the bottom. The one at the bottom, that's easy as pie to get on. The one at the front over here, not so bad. This one, royal. Here's why. There's an extra reinforcement piece of metal between the outer skin and the glass that goes all the way along the top. Up front here, I don't know if you can see it, it flares away from the door right here. And that allows you to get at those two bolts that are over here pretty easy. But that back bolt is behind where it's flat and tight, and it's a real... Here's what's going to happen when you do it. You're going to drop the nut about 50 times trying to get them on there. And eventually you'll succeed and get them to spin on. You might have to press the mirror on to compress the gasket so enough bolt sticks out for you to get the bolt started. It's a metric 10mm nut. And the solution I found for getting at the bolt that's farthest over here and behind that reinforcement metal is I took a 1/2-inch piece of plywood and pulled that metal out and shoved that wood block in there. Here it is right here. And I got it wedged up underneath there, and that gave me enough clearance to get the nut on, and then I used a 10mm gear wrench or speed wrench to tighten all the bolts. Now you don't want to, the thing isn't a perfect fit. You don't want to just keep cranking until you can't crank them any tighter. You will break the plastic of the rearview mirror. You want to go until you'll notice it'll suddenly start to firm up at a certain point. The torque will ramp up at a certain point. At that point, you're pretty good. You can even grab the mirror and see if you can get it to move much more. And if you feel that there's some additional tightening possible, you can get your wrench in there and tighten it some more. But that's basically it. This is a manual mirror. There's electric ones that you can buy. There's lots of them out there, and you can buy them brand new for, I think they're about $40 a mirror, $47 a mirror on eBay. And there's plenty of clearance for the glass. The mirror has a good 3/8 of an inch gap between the glass and the mirror and the mirror housing, so you're good there. And around this side, show the folks what it looks like in the light. Now you can take a razor blade and sort of trim some of the rubber off, or the foam rubber off, if it displeases you. I had slipped the gasket on and then used my benchtop belt sander to get the gap all the way around, or how much sticks out, fairly even at about 1/4 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch. And that's about it. And that's all she wrote.